Hello, everyone, and welcome. There are moments in life that feel strangely uncertain. Nothing seems completely wrong, yet nothing feels the same anymore. The path ahead appears unclear, familiar things lose their meaning, and a quiet inner voice begins asking questions you can no longer ignore. Today, we will explore why these difficult seasons may actually be preparing you for the most meaningful chapter of your life. Have you ever felt that just before your life was about to change, everything suddenly became heavier, more confusing, and harder to understand? The life that once felt comfortable no longer seems to nourish you. The goals that once motivated you begin to lose their importance. And somewhere deep inside, you carry a quiet feeling that you can no longer continue living exactly as you have been. But this is not always a sign that something is going wrong. Sometimes it is the beginning of something deeper awakening within you. Before the most beautiful chapter of life begins, people rarely walk directly into the light. More often, they pass through a silent transition where old identities begin to loosen their grip. Parts of life that are no longer aligned with who they are start to fade away. Long-buried emotions rise to the surface, not to punish them, but to finally be acknowledged and understood. True growth often begins when a person is willing to face the hidden layers within themselves. A new life cannot emerge while an old version of the self remains trapped in fear, habit, and quiet self-betrayal. In this video, we will explore why, before life opens a more meaningful chapter, many people experience feelings of confusion, loneliness, loss, and long periods of inner uncertainty. And if you stay until the end, you may discover that what seems to be falling apart is not necessarily your life. It may simply be an outdated version of yourself making room for the person you are becoming. There is a peculiar moment in life when almost nothing appears different on the outside, yet everything feels different within. You continue waking up at the same time, following the same routines, doing the same work, and meeting the same people who have been part of your daily life. Yet, with each passing day, something feels increasingly distant. It is not because your life has suddenly become terrible. It is not because you are ungrateful, weak, or impossible to satisfy. What makes this experience unsettling is that everything still looks normal. Yet that normality no longer nourishes the deepest part of who you are. Human beings do not live on responsibilities, schedules, income, or external approval alone. Deep within, every person carries an inner rhythm of growth, a deeper calling that quietly guides their development. In the beginning, many of us build lives around safety. We choose paths that seem reasonable. We learn how to behave in ways that earn acceptance. We create versions of ourselves that fit comfortably into the expectations of others. But eventually, if that life helps us survive without helping us become more authentic, something inside begins to resist. You may have seen this happen before. Someone appears successful, responsible, and completely in control. They do everything expected of them. They meet deadlines, fulfill obligations, and maintain a calm exterior. Yet beneath that surface, they carry a quiet exhaustion, not because their life is collapsing, but because they have spent so much time functioning that they no longer remember what genuinely makes them feel alive. Many people know this feeling. No dramatic breakdown occurs. No major crisis announces itself. One day you simply wake up and realize you have been living on autopilot for far too long. You continue doing all the right things. You smile when expected. You meet your responsibilities. Yet a small question begins echoing somewhere within. Is this truly the life I am meant to live? And once that question appears, it becomes difficult to return to unconscious living, because the discomfort is not necessarily coming from the fact that your life is wrong. It is coming from the realization that your current life may no longer reflect the person you are becoming. What feels right for one person may feel deeply restrictive to another. There is no single blueprint for a meaningful life. Some lives appear perfect from the outside while quietly suffocating the person living inside them. A career can be someone's dream and another person's cage. A relationship can provide security while slowly encouraging someone to abandon their authentic self. A lifestyle can be praised by society and still leave a person feeling disconnected from their own spirit. This experience is very different from ordinary boredom. Boredom often fades after rest, novelty, or a change of scenery. But the feeling of no longer being nourished reaches much deeper. It does not simply suggest that you need a break. It may be telling you that some part of you has outgrown the life you once needed. Imagine a tree growing inside a small container. At first, the container protects its roots and provides stability. But eventually, the same container that once supported growth becomes the very thing that limits it. The old life works in much the same way. Perhaps it once protected you. Perhaps it gave you safety during an important stage of your journey. But as you continue to grow, it may become too small to support who you are becoming. Real transformation often begins when a person stops identifying completely with the role they have been playing. This is the moment when you realize you are more than a title, more than the image others have created of you, more than the dependable person who always endures, always adapts, and always knows how to do the right thing. Something within begins asking deeper questions. Is this life still aligned with who I am becoming? Am I truly living, or simply maintaining a version of myself that feels easier for others to accept? Am I growing, or have I simply become skilled at ignoring what I really feel? These questions can be uncomfortable, but they are often signs of awakening. When the deeper layers of the mind begin asking questions, it usually means that some part of you no longer wants to remain asleep inside a life that only appears meaningful from the outside. So when your old life no longer nourishes you, do not immediately assume that something is wrong with you. Perhaps you are finally hearing a signal that was always there, hidden beneath years of noise, routine, and distraction. Perhaps the emptiness is not here to destroy your life. Perhaps it has appeared to reveal the places where truth has quietly disappeared. What once protected you may have already fulfilled its purpose. What once helped you survive may no longer be enough to help you truly live. The first step is not to rush into dramatic changes or convince yourself that you have suddenly transformed. The first step is simply to pay attention. Notice where this feeling of emptiness appears. Does it show up in your work, in your relationships, in your daily routines, or in the image of yourself that you have carried for far too long? And perhaps this is the first sign that a more meaningful chapter is approaching, not a door suddenly opening, not a miracle appearing overnight, but the moment when old patterns lose their power to keep you asleep. You begin to realize that half-hearted safety is not the same as peace. You begin to realize that familiarity is not the same as belonging. You begin to realize that acceptance loses its value when the cost is abandoning your own truth. The moment a person can no longer be nourished by what is no longer genuine has already begun moving beyond the old boundaries of life. Even if that transition feels confusing, it is also the moment when the roots of the soul quietly begin searching for wider ground. The second sign is the silent losses that make room for growth. After the old life stops nourishing you, a new chapter rarely appears immediately. Instead, life often introduces a series of quiet losses, not dramatic events that change everything overnight, but subtle shifts that slowly loosen your attachment to what once felt secure. A relationship no longer feels the way it once did. A place that once felt like home begins to feel distant. A belief that once guided you no longer provides the answers you need. You do not lose everything at once. Instead, it feels as though life is carefully removing one thread after another from a fabric that can no longer hold its original shape. What makes this stage difficult is that many of these losses are difficult to describe. They are invisible enough that others may not notice them, yet significant enough to change the way you experience your life. You continue going to work. You continue replying to messages. You continue smiling when necessary. Yet deep inside, there is a quiet awareness that something is ending. As awareness expands, the old structures of the mind cannot remain unchanged forever. Certain things that once acted as anchors eventually become limitations, and because of this, Loss is not always punishment. Sometimes it is the mind creating space for a deeper version of yourself to emerge. Many stories of transformation follow this pattern. Before true wisdom arrives, people often lose the identities, beliefs, and attachments they once depended upon. From the outside, these experiences may look like failures, but from a deeper perspective, each loss removes another layer of illusion. Growth becomes possible when we stop clinging to versions of ourselves that no longer reflect who we are. Major transitions often create periods of confusion before a more stable identity emerges. The human mind naturally clings to what is familiar, even when that familiarity is no longer healthy. Familiarity creates a sense of safety. This is why loss hurts. We are not only grieving people, roles, or beliefs. We are also grieving the sense of security those things provided. Sometimes we believe we are becoming weaker when, in reality, we are learning how to stand without old supports. There are losses that feel painful because they expose truths we were not ready to see. Perhaps we called dependence love. Perhaps we called endurance maturity. Perhaps we called familiarity peace. Awareness always comes with a cost. Once you see clearly, it becomes difficult to return to the comforting illusions that once protected you. That is why silent losses are often signs that life is gently pulling you away from a reality that has become too small for your growth. Imagine a potter reshaping clay. Before a stronger form can emerge, the clay must soften. It must lose its previous shape. From the outside, this looks like disorder. But within that apparent disorder, something new is being created. The human soul moves through similar seasons. There are periods when you feel directionless. Yet beneath the surface, old structures are dissolving. There are times when you doubt everything. Yet beneath that uncertainty, outdated answers are losing their power over you. This does not mean loss should be romanticized. Loss still hurts. Being left behind still hurts. Realizing that something important no longer belongs in your life still leaves an ache. Maturity is not the absence of pain. It is the ability to hold pain with greater awareness. When something leaves, it creates space. At first, that space feels frightening because you cannot yet see what will eventually fill it. But without empty space, nothing new can enter. If your hands remain tightly closed around what has already ended, they cannot receive what is waiting ahead. So instead of rushing to reclaim everything that is leaving, allow yourself to observe. Notice what life is naturally asking you to release. Do not immediately blame yourself because something familiar can no longer be held together. Allow loss to be acknowledged for what it is. Then gently ask yourself what kind of space it may be creating within you. Perhaps you cannot yet see the next chapter. But sometimes growth begins the moment you stop trying to force yourself back into a chapter that has already ended. And if this resonates with you, carry one simple reminder with you today. Some things are not leaving because they failed. Some things are leaving because their purpose in your life has been completed. What matters most during this stage is not forcing yourself to be strong all the time. Sometimes the most important thing you can do is keep your life simple enough that you do not lose touch with yourself. Rest when your body is exhausted. Eat something nourishing, even if it is simple. Write a few honest thoughts about what feels heavy in your heart without trying to solve everything immediately. Avoid making major decisions when your emotions are overwhelming. And each day, do one small thing that reminds you that you are still on your own side. Because sometimes a major turning point does not begin with a dramatic breakthrough. It begins the moment you stop treating your pain as something shameful. Take a moment to reflect on your own journey. What has your darkest season taken from you? And what has it quietly awakened within you? Many people discover that during the moments when they believed they were close to breaking, there was still a part of them quietly enduring, quietly learning, and quietly waiting for the chance to step into the light. The fifth sign is when a new door begins to open from within. After the darkest stage passes, people rarely wake up one morning and find themselves living an entirely different life. The same room may still surround them. The same job may still be there. The same roads may still lead them through each day. But something inside has begun to move in a different direction. They no longer react the way they once did. They no longer return so easily to choices that drain their energy. They no longer fully believe every fear that once controlled their decisions. And often the first new door does not appear as an exciting opportunity in the outside world. Instead, it appears as a quiet realization. I no longer want to live against myself. This is one of the most important turning points in personal growth. After the old life has stopped nourishing you, after loss has stripped away familiar certainties, after hidden emotions have risen into awareness, and after you have walked through the darkness, something within begins reorganizing itself. Real transformation rarely begins when circumstances change. It begins when consciousness itself begins standing in a new place. When a hidden fear is recognized, it loses some of its power. When a buried longing is acknowledged, it begins pointing toward a more authentic direction. When an unconscious pattern becomes visible, it no longer controls every choice from behind the scenes. For a long time, life can feel as though it is happening to us. We blame circumstances, we blame timing, we blame other people. We feel trapped inside the same lessons repeating over and over again. But once we begin recognizing the deeper patterns shaping our choices, life starts to look different. It becomes easier to see where we lost ourselves, and it becomes easier to see the path back. Consider a simple example. Someone who has spent years trying to please everyone finally begins paying attention to their own limits. Before, they would immediately say yes, immediately explain themselves, immediately soften every situation so that nobody else felt uncomfortable. But now, something changes. When a request arrives, they pause. When a demand exceeds their capacity, they think carefully before agreeing. When a conversation leaves them feeling dismissed, they no longer force themselves to pretend everything is fine. Nothing dramatic happens. No one else may even notice. Yet in that small moment, a new door has opened. The mind and nervous system gradually learn that not every boundary leads to rejection. Not every disagreement leads to abandonment. Not every honest truth destroys love. Little by little, a different relationship with life begins to form. Imagine a house that has remained closed for years. The windows are shut, the rooms are dark. Not because sunlight does not exist outside, but because no opening has allowed it to enter. Then one day, a single window is opened slightly. The light does not flood every room at once. It touches only a small corner, a single wall, a layer of dust that was invisible before. Yet that small beam is enough to prove that darkness is not the whole story. The human soul often changes in the same way. When a new door opens within, you may not yet know where life is taking you. You may not have all the answers, but you begin to sense a different current moving through your life. And as long as that current is real, you are no longer completely trapped inside the person you used to be. It is important not to mistake this new beginning for a promise that everything will suddenly become easy. Fear may still appear. Doubt may still visit. Old attachments may still call you back. The difference is that now you see them more clearly. You understand why you are afraid. You understand what part of you is searching for safety, and you understand that another part of you is searching for truth. That awareness changes everything, because once you become conscious of what is happening within you, the old darkness can no longer guide your life in quite the same way. The new door often opens very quietly. It may be the first time you speak honestly about your feelings without apologizing for them, the first time you choose rest without feeling guilty, the first time you stop chasing someone simply because you fear being left behind, the first time you realize you do not need to become the most agreeable version of yourself in order to deserve love. These moments may appear small from the outside, yet inwardly, they are profound movements. Every time you choose truth over self-abandonment, you teach your mind that another way of living is possible. And perhaps the most beautiful chapter of your life does not begin with a spectacular event. Perhaps it begins with a quiet shift in the way you remain loyal to yourself. One day, you may still walk the same roads, yet your eyes will be different. You may still face familiar challenges, yet they will no longer possess the same power over you. You may still not have every answer, yet deep within, a new foundation will have formed, a quiet place that knows you can no longer betray what is true. That door does not need to open all at once. It only needs to open enough for a small stream of light to enter. The rest of the journey is learning how to follow that light. As this journey comes to an end, one truth becomes clear. Before life unfolds into a more meaningful chapter, people often pass through a silent season where familiar things lose their hold. Hidden emotions return, old beliefs begin to weaken, and there are days when everything appears to slow down. Yet beneath the surface, something important is being rearranged. This difficult period is not necessarily a sign that life is falling apart. It may be the stage where the deepest part of you begins guiding you toward a more authentic way of living. So if you find yourself in a season that has no clear name, where your heart feels tired but your soul refuses to return to who you used to be, perhaps you are not losing your life. Perhaps you are being prepared for a life that feels more honest, a life where acceptance no longer requires self-betrayal, a life where endurance is no longer confused with peace, a life where survival is no longer the highest goal. If something in this journey caused you to pause, stay with that feeling for a moment. Sometimes silence is not created by sadness. Sometimes it is created by the quiet call of a new chapter beginning to take shape within us. And perhaps the most beautiful chapter of all does not begin with an outer miracle. Perhaps it begins with a single, almost invisible decision, the decision to stop abandoning yourself.